Welcome to another version of the Jerry Acuff Show. I'm super stoked today to have our guest, Kevin Kruse. Kevin is an expert in, so many things. And if I spent 20 minutes of this podcast reading his bio, I would not get through all the things he's accomplished. But he's an expert in leadership, employee engagement, time management. Wrote a best-selling book about that everybody should read. He's an expert on selling and also branding. He's the founder of LEADx.org, which is a free leadership training that's available to anybody at any time over the internet. He is a best-selling author, New York Times bestselling author. I'm a best-selling author, not New York Times, but he's the New York Times bestselling author of 6 books. He also, in his spare time, contributes to Forbes magazine and the Huffington Post. He's a fabulous keynote speaker, and he speaks to all kinds of companies. He also advises Fortune 500 CEOs. He advises the Marines, and even apparently advises some members of Congress who clearly have taken a hiatus from his expertise. We are really delighted that he's on our podcast, and welcome to the Jerry Acuff Show, Kevin.
Jerry, thanks for having me. That was a very generous introduction.
Well, it's funny what how you and I met, and then ultimately had such an incredible connection, sort of, with Ian Kelly. It's the 6 degrees of separation. But I want to start because I know you talk about entrepreneurship, and you are the quintessential serial entrepreneur. Tell our listeners how you became such a successful entrepreneur.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm still learning every day. I think, I'm 50 years old now. Over the last 30 years, I've started, I think it's probably about 8 companies, and the early ones crashed and burned miserably. The middle ones did okay. Some of the later ones did really well. So I'm a slow learner, but I do learn. And I got the bug from my father, and he was always doing different entrepreneurial ventures. And actually, I was really motivated when I was about 15 years old, and his company went under, and we lost everything. Lost our house, had to move out of the house, and I just remember writing down in this little notebook that I kept. I said, I don't care what it takes, but when I grow up, I'm going to have a ton of money. And it sounds like a funny thing to write down, but it wasn't about the cars or the toys or any of those things that a lot of people these days seem to want to be an entrepreneur for. It was just a 15-year-old saying, I never want to get thrown out of my house by a debt collector again. And so, I was the first kid in my family, my extended family, to ever go to college, worked my way through college. And the very first day I graduated, I foolishly started my first company. And that one crashed and burned after a year. I tried to do another one. It took 2 years for that one to fail. And it was finally the third one that took about 5 years, and it was a tiny little company doing just over $1 million in revenue. And I sold that, and then I did a bigger one and a bigger one. And it kind of went from there. But that's how it all started.
Well, it's fascinating, the parallels in your story and mine. My father was bankrupt 3 times.
Wow.
And but like your dad, he kept going. And, my junior and senior year in high school, I think we got evicted 6 or 7 times from 6 or 7 different places. We'd come home and the lights would be turned off. And I remember, at 17 saying to myself, I don't ever want to be in this position. I am going to find a way to be successful. And one of these days, I'm going to run my own company. I was the first in my family to go to college, just like you. So it's amazing the parallels. I think a lot of, our success is being willing to fail,
right?
And understanding that failure is never final unless you let it be.
But Jerry, let me ask you a question. This is great because now this is like getting my own perspective, from a different angle. Because as I tell people that story, more often than not, what people say is, I still don't understand why you decided to become an entrepreneur, because seeing your father fail like that, seeing the pain and the agony most people, normal people, would have taken that message and said, you know what, I'm going to get a desk job. I'm going to climb a corporate ladder in a big company. And yet in your case, in my case, we somehow took that negative outcome and said, that's exactly what we're going to do, but be successful. Like, why do you think we did that?
That's a good question. But your path was so different than mine because I took the other path. I said, I'm going to go and be really successful in a company. And I didn't become an entrepreneur until my early 40s, and which I advise people against, candidly. I think the best time to be an entrepreneur is as early as you can when you have the least responsibilities. When I started my entrepreneurial career, candidly, it was because I had a hard time finding a job.
Yeah.
And so, mine was sort of the necessities and mother of invention. When I started this company, which I've owned for 17 years, I had just gotten fired from a job as VP of sales, even though I took them from $4 million to $8 million in a year because I got into a tiff with the owner. And at 51, I couldn't find work. And so
wow.
I had no choice but to start my own business. But I always had this philosophy, and I still do to this day, that failure for me is not an option. And so no matter where I find myself, and, I actually wrote a blog this week about, people look at your bio and my bio and say, wow, these people are wildly successful. What they don't see is all of those moments where we weren't feeling so successful.
That's right.
When, like you said, when your first company crashed, your second company, the first 4 years I was an entrepreneur, for 5 years, I borrowed $123,000 from 17 different credit cards.
Wow.
And it took me 6 years to pay them off. But I think there's something in people that makes them want to be their own boss.
Right.
And the thing that really caused me to leave my last job was I realized that no matter how high I climbed, I'd never be my own boss. I would always have, when I found out I couldn't hire my own secretary, I said, well, what kind of authority do I have here running a $650 million business? And so I don't know. I just think, and then, the reality is I had seen other people do it and be successful. And I had come to the conclusion that, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. And I think that's a part of it. But I think there's just something inside you that says you want to do your own thing.
Yeah, and where that comes from, maybe some of it's even genetic. It's almost like a personality thing, because most of the entrepreneurs I know, even when they're already fully busy with one or more things going on, they can't help but see opportunities every day and think about other businesses they want to start, or go out to a restaurant and try and enjoy the meal. And you're thinking about how you can run the restaurant better.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I've got 2 or 3 other ventures going now that are things that just spawned, and and you say, hey, that's a really good idea. I want to be involved in that. So I think there's something in you that says, you like making things work and making successful. I think the most rewarding thing for me about our business, other than, obviously, the financial security that being successful brings, is the fact that, you're employing people.
Yeah.
I have 30 people who work, in our company, and they're dependent on the success of our company. Now, thank God, all 29 of them, other than me, are smarter than me, and they know how to make our company better. But I'm intrigued, not to change the subject, but I'm still fascinated by your vision about LEADx.org. To me, it's such an important initiative, and it's a bold vision that you have for impacting people by spreading wisdom about leadership. How'd you come up with that, and what is that like, and how can people get involved?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, Jim, because I sold my last big company about 10 years ago, and because I was tired and because I had a multi-year non-compete, I was sort of forced to do other things, and that's when I started writing some books, and I was doing leadership of a nonprofit society for a while. But finally, my kids got a little older, and I got to the point, and once an entrepreneur, I think always an entrepreneur, I was ready to start something up. And it would have been the easiest thing in the world to start another life sciences training company, which is what I had done successfully a few times before. It would have been very easy to use existing relationships or to build the keynote speaking business. But, fortunately, I was in a point where I just had to pause and say, don't worry about what's comfortable or what has high odds of success. What would be something so big that it's likely to fail? Like, what's a dream so big that I cannot achieve it on my own? What would I do if I could wave a magic wand and do anything and know that it will work out? And to me, it really came back to realizing that so much of success in life to me is about leadership, not always just leading in a workplace, but leadership in our family, in our communities, self-leadership. And I realized that there wasn't a way for people to get free world-class professional development and leadership training. There's for K through 12 education, you can go to the Khan Academy, very well known, great videos for K through 12. If you want a free college education, you can go to EDX, and they offer free courses from MIT and Harvard and all the rest. But there was no site for world-class free professional development. So that's what I decided to pursue, and we're all of a year old now. So LEADx.org, every day we release another free training video, anywhere from 20 minutes to 1 hour long. There's management courses, leadership courses, productivity courses, career advice, how to build your professional brand. And we're building the library, week by week, month by month. And that's really how it came to be. I just thought about what is something, like I was such a horrible manager, such a horrible leader in all areas of my life, all through my 20s and a little bit into my 30s. And there's so many people who either are in that small to mid-sized company and they're just not getting any professional training or development at all, or they're in a big company and it's not very good. And so I just wanted, no matter who you are around the world, if you've got internet access on your phone in the palm of your hand, you're going to be able to get access to some great training. And right now, because in startup mode, I'm developing a lot of the training. One of my other colleagues, Tara Millette, is the host of a lot of training. But we're looking to open it up and bring free courses in from great practitioners from all over the world.
Right. So, well, that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, I was struck by one thing that you said, though, that I don't know that I've ever heard this term, but boy, it smacked me in the face when you said it, self-leadership.
Yeah, I've got an unusual, some unusual thoughts about leadership, Jerry. In my mind, if you look up boil down the definition of leadership, and Maxwell says this, Blanchard says this, that leadership is influence. If you had to pick one word, leadership is influence. But we know from social psychologists that we influence people around us, whether we want to or not. It's called social contagion. What we say and do, what we don't say, influence those around us. And we know that there's ways to influence ourselves. How do you get yourself from a couch potato to a marathon runner? How do you lose weight and get in shape? How do you get out of debt and make money? How do you become the best version of yourself you can become? All of this has to do with influencing yourself. So to me, I say, you're a leader whether you want to be or not, because if leadership is influence, we're all influencing everybody around us in one direction or another. If we come home after work and sit down and have dinner with our kids are a little more likely to stay in school, stay away from drugs and other risky behaviors. If we don't have dinner with our family at least 4 nights a week, our kids are more likely to have risky behaviors, experiment with drugs, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to cast blame or attack anybody that doesn't have dinners at home with their family, every night. But the data is clear. You influence in one direction if you do one behavior, you influence a little bit in the other direction with another behavior. So we're all leading, we're all influencing whether we want to or not.
I always say, what's the definition of a leader? I say a leader is someone who has followers. The question is, why would somebody want to follow you? Right. And, the truth is, I always go back to, what do employees want from their supervisor? Don Beveridge said this 35 years ago. He said, employees want 5 things from a supervisor. 1, they want competent job instruction. And by the way, in many companies, you don't get competent job instruction from your leader.
Right.
The second thing they want is a degree of independence in doing the job. The third thing they want is um, they want praise for a job well done. The fourth thing they want is to be informed about the things that matter to them. And the fifth thing they want is they want to work for a leader, not a boss.
Hmm.
Beveridge said boss spelled backwards is double SOB. And but if you think about that in terms of self, you know, all those things are probably true. I do want a degree of independence. I do like being praised, when I do something well. I do need competent supervision. And usually the person that I need to supervise me is me. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the whole concept of, to me, self-awareness is the key to all growth and development. And it's understanding why continuous learning is incredibly powerful. Well, I hope you'll let me know what I can do to support you in LEADx, because I think it's an incredible thing. I read one of your books, which was the Snapchat book,
Oh yeah, right.
which I just love that book. Your idea about social media intimacy as a tactic that can drive your brand and create a stronger connection with your followers. Can you talk about that for a minute? Because I think that's genius.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you like that, but you might be one of the only ones that read it, because that was a labor of love. Text me, snap me, ask me anything. And that was the whole premise, is that people ask me, how do you build a business? How do you build your brand? How do you build your audience? How do you find customers? And to me, I always say, listen, life is about making an impact, not making an income. But the more of an impact you make, the more value you provide, the more your income is going to be, the more wealth you're going to create. And so the way I've built the audience as an author, as a speaker, as consultant, it's just by helping people, answering people's questions, trying to provide impact. And so it starts with just going to wherever your target audience is hanging out. These days, a lot of times it's on social media. Not, if you're, I don't know, if you're into fashion or fitness, your followers, your age group, that demographics probably is on Instagram. If you are a business professional trying to reach other business professionals, LinkedIn as a social network is on fire these days. That's where people are hanging out. It doesn't have to be on social media, but the idea is just to go hang out, social media, online, or other places, and be helpful to others, to let people know that you do respond to every email, that you invite people to ask you questions. And every day, I try to answer. I'm not perfect. I'm a little behind these days, but if I can answer 5 or 10 reader questions a day, questions from strangers each day, that's a lot of one-on-one connections throughout the year. That's a lot of providing value. And they're not all going to buy a book or book me to speak, but over time, there's building up an awareness and, the law of reciprocity, people that want to help me to spread the message, that help me do good things. So it's as simple as that.
Yeah, but oftentimes the most powerful things are simple. I always believe that there's universal laws of nature that you can't change, right? One of them is when you give, you get.
Mm.
And the more you give, the more you get. And so since you taught me that in that book, I bet I've responded to 80% of the messages I've gotten on LinkedIn or Snapchat or Twitter, and some of them have been quite lengthy.
Yeah.
I actually had a guy who's got a business called Internet Street Radio Network, and he asked me a question, and I answered it, and I mean he and I become very tight. And the next thing I know, he's writing this glowing recommendation about me on LinkedIn. I never met the guy. I talked to him on the phone, etc. But
It's great.
it really is a practice that pays huge dividends. I always tell people, and I don't know who I stole this from, but I stole it from somebody. They said, everybody has an invisible tattoo that says "Make me feel important."
Right. Right.
And I think when you listen to people, you respond to people, you do make them important. So I thank you for that idea. It has helped me tremendously. I don't want us to stop and because I could talk to you all day, but I want to hear about your podcast, because your podcast is like the model for what all podcasts could be, because I know you have tens of thousands, if not 100,000, people who actually access your podcast at some point in time during the course of a week or month or whatever. How did you build that?
Yeah, well, the LEADx leadership show, I thought again, what is a way where I can both learn from others and spread the message. Podcasts are free to consume, and so you're right. We've been at it for a year. We get about 100,000 listens a month. I've just recorded, I think it was episode number 235. So it's been a 5-day-a-week show for almost a year. And I'm going to cut that back just a little bit moving into 2018. But it's been great because, one of the things is I think in this information overload age that we're in, the first rule of kind of persuasion or influence is attention. I mean, without attention, you've got nothing. So early on, I thought, okay, let me do a daily show so that anyone who's interested in leadership and achieving their full potential, they know that when they're commuting into work, whether it's in their car or on the bus or they're getting on that treadmill, every morning there would be a message from the LEADx leadership show. And so I committed to that schedule for the entire first year. And I just invited on all kinds of people who have been really generous. I mean, I've been able to interview everyone from Alan Alda and Captain Sully Sullenberger, the guy who landed the plane in the Hudson, to, best-selling business authors, Dan Pink and Kim Scott, who wrote Radical Candor, and, just literally dozens and dozens and dozens of others. And so I think by partnering up with these other authors and influencers, and by doing this daily format, we were able to get to that 100,000 number relatively quickly. But I'm always learning. I mean, I always experiment with that show. The shows we do today are very different than the ones I started with. And I'm now to the point where I'm thinking that less is maybe more, and that by scaling the show back down, we can be a little more selective with our guests and spend a little bit more time talking to each one.
Gotcha. Tell me a little bit about one or two of the books that you've written in the New York Times bestseller list that really are germane for people who want to be successful in business or as a leader.
Well, in terms of the leadership and management one, the best-selling book, it's really a quick read, is called Employee Engagement 2.0, and it's just a quick read for managers who are looking for practical and no-cost ways to engage their employees. But the book that surprised me, because again, I took a year just to write the book I would want to write, separate from any business angle, and I've long been fascinated by time and productivity. To me, time is life. We all have 1,440 minutes in the day, and we need to be mindful of how we invest those minutes. And so I wrote a book called 15 Secrets Successful People Know About Time Management. And I interviewed over 200 self-made billionaires like Mark Cuban and co-founders of Facebook, self-made millionaires and entrepreneurs, Olympic athletes, even straight-A students from Ivy League colleges. And all of these people, I just asked one question, give me your number one secret to productivity. They could answer anything they wanted. And so I got all their answers, and then I kind of coded them into, common themes. And that's how we came up with the 15 themes, the 15 secrets. And that book, again, it was just something I wanted to write for myself. I wanted it to be able to hand to my own children. And that outsells all of my leadership and management books combined.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, I know our time is short here. I want to sort of close this thing, number one, by thanking you for being a guest. Gosh, it's you're a fountain of knowledge. I leave here with three sort of overarching thoughts that I hope our listeners will take to heart. Understand how important leadership is, and self-leadership is a critical part of that. But the other thing I would say is a subset of that one learning is that if you can't manage your time, you can't do much of anything else. And so that's why I think that book is so incredibly powerful, is that, the only resource that we have any ultimately great control over is how we spend our time. This idea that, that the more you give, the more you get.
Yeah.
I mean, you've made a career out of giving, and thinking about even as you think about your vision, you're thinking about giving. And I think that's important. And the last one is, and I think you and I have experienced this as much as anybody, Og Mandino wrote the best-selling sales book ever, I think he sold, I don't know, 15 million copies of a book called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And in that book, he says, it's not given to know how many steps are necessary in order to reach my goal. Failure I may still encounter at the 1,000th step, yet success hides just beyond the next bend in the road. Never will I know how close it lies unless I turn the corner. And most people stop turning the corner. They get close to being successful and then they quit. And I think successful entrepreneurs understand that, and successful business people understand that, setbacks, reservations, hesitations, barriers, failures are all a part of the learning curve, and you just got to keep turning the corner. So thanks for being a terrific guest. I look forward to being a guest on your podcast and contributing in any way that I can, our material in terms of leadership. And lastly, I would say, as I end every podcast of the Jerry Acuff Show, be incredible.
RMCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.